Auzubillah minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So we were discussing about this ayah, which is in Surah Rum, ayah number 30, which uh, I'll just read the meanings again. So direct your face towards the religion, inclining to the truth. Ladeen Hanifa is inclining to the truth. Fitrat Allah illati fatara nasu alayha, ke adhere to the fitra of Allah upon which He has created all people. La tabdila li khalqillahi, and no change should be there in the creation of Allah. Zalika dinul qayyim, and this is the correct religion. Walakinna aksara nasu la ya'lamun, but most of the people don't know it. So this was the ayah that we discussed, and we were talking about last time about this soul and the fitra. Our soul, which Allah Ta'ala has breathed into us when He created the Adam, and that soul ki jo nature thi, that was being defined here by Allah Ta'ala, it is based on the nature of Allah Ta'ala Himself. And now this translation that I'm reading, it is called, if you read here, Sahih translation, which means that it is a word for word translation. But there are a lot of scholars who translated it based on their understanding. So I'm not talking about them over here. So last time I think we talked about a similar verse in the Bible, which said that God created man in His own image. We talked about that. And we discussed that how, because of the Roman influence and their pressure and their persecution, the Christianity had to adopt some of the paganism that Romans wanted them to adopt. And we talked about Surah Al-Buruj, where there was mentioned how severely Christians were persecuted. So because of that influence, we see that in Christianity now they have believe in more than one God. They have Nauzubillah, Son of God, then there's a God, and then there's a Holy Spirit. And instead of being monotheistic, which was their practice before, this is I believe that before the Roman influence came into existence. So now I'm going to go into the same topic because there was a few things I did not mention, that why the Christians were forced to adopt that. So it's mentioned in Quran, and that's why I'm mentioning it here. The entire persecution of Christians is mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf about the people of caves. So it goes back, I think, to 250 AD. At that point, there was a Roman emperor by the name of Decius, I think that's what he was called. In Urdu, we call him Dakianus, but at that in Roman, they call him Decius. So he issued an edict, which was during his time, because he was afraid that the Roman culture is being damaged and destroyed by the Christians. So he issued an edict that nowadays, that from now on, everyone in the Roman Empire is going to pay tribute or sacrifice to the Roman gods. And then the second thing was that everyone is going to burn incense before the image of emperor for goodwill. And again, the reason was because Christianity was a new religion. The Romans thought of them as socially very disruptive and threat to a Roman culture. And also because it was rapidly expanding, a lot of people were adopting the Christianity, unlike Jewish religion in which no one could enter. So they had no problem with the Jews at that time, but they had problem with the Christianity because they were preaching, and a lot of people were being converted to Christians. So when this edict was issued, it was so much against the monotheistic belief of Christianity that some of the people refused to follow it. And then they were put to death. I think there was a pope who was put to death because of that. Eventually, when the people saw that, and that was actually the start of the persecution of the Christians on a national level. Before that, there were only few incidents here and there at the town level. But after the Decius, he issued this edict it was sponsored by the state that it's okay to persecute the Christians. And then for the next 200 years, they were really persecuted very badly. So some of the people who were from the good families, from the strong families of Christian, and they had means to um, migrate, they decided that they are not going to follow the edict that was issued by the uh, Roman emperor, and they would migrate. So these people, we don't know their exact number, but some say there were quite a few, and some of them say there were 7. Quran does not give any number in that. The Quran just says that they migrated out, and they went and they went in a cave and they were put to sleep. And for centuries, I think they slept over there, 300 or 309 years. Like the accounts differ. Quran says it's about 300 years or 309. Doesn't give an exact number, and the Christianity has a different number for that. But after many centuries, I think they woke up, um, and one of them came back, and the whole Roman Empire had changed because everyone adopted Christianity. There were churches, there were a cross everywhere. So it was a surprise for them. But by that time, the religion of Christianity had changed a lot, because in the preceding 200 years, they were persecuted so badly and they were forced to pay tribute to the gods and to sacrifice to them, that it became a part of their normal religious practice to do that. And so when these Ashab-e Kahf, Allah Ta'ala brought them back to show them, to tell them what the true Christianity was, but I think it was already too late. It was such a widely adopted religious practice that no one probably listened to them, and eventually those people, the people of cave, they died out, and they're still revered as martyrs, and they're given a very high status in Christianity, but their true teachings, I think they never made it to the general public. So this Christianity, although monotheistic, developed some Roman pagan rituals in them. And now comes the Islam in Arabia. So initially, when the Islam came, Muslims were, it was a tribal community. They were a very small group of people in a small country. And everyone all probably knew what other tribe was, and they could easily exchange the ideas and religious thought processes. So it was not a major issue for them. But when the Muslims started the conquest, and with the conquest of the Roman and the Persian Empire, now they had all of a sudden such huge amount of lands that they had to administer. And also a lot of people, they became Muslims as well. So then there was a need that they had to establish some Islamic laws and Islamic rules to run the government. And that is when the madrasas were established. So madrasas at those times, they were like small universities who were teaching the Islamic law, which is also called Islamic fiqh. In our Arabic language or Urdu, it is called fiqh. So whenever you say कि fiqh ulama, which means that ulama who know the jurisprudence of Islam. So Islamic fiqh or jurisprudence, it became a widely taught subject because the government needed the administrators, the judges, the policemen, the people who know the land laws, the inheritance laws, all those things. So there was like an outpouring of a lot of these trained individuals who were experts in Islamic fiqh in their field. And they were good practicing Muslims, and they went into position of power. But they were not meant to be the spiritual guides for the Muslims. Like you can go to them and ask them, okay, I have this much property and so died, so how the property is going to be divided, and they knew the answer. Or if someone has committed crime, these were the circumstances, they could give the answer that under these and these circumstances, this should be done. But matters pertaining to spirituality, like they were not trained in that. They were trained only in the law at that point. And that is historically how Islamic ulamas and madrasas have been, that they teach Islamic fiqh. So, which means that if today some Muslim country decides that they want to establish Islamic laws in their country, we have all the knowledge to run a country, but it does not mean that it will lead to the spiritual or the moral correction of the people as well, just because you have laws there. That is a totally different thing. So at the same time, when this madrasas were being established, there were a lot of Muslim thinkers who started rising up. They mostly were from Persia or the ancient Iran. And what happened that the Muslims had conquered the Persia, and there was one very famous university, library, and a teaching hospital there by the name of Gandhishpur. So Gandhishpur was established. It was a big library that was established by Khusro, who was the Persian emperor. And he was like, he used to support the music and the literature and the books. So at the time when Roman Empire was declining, now this is happening when the Roman Empire is declining, and they burnt the books in the Library of Alexandria, thinking that they are pagan books. And some of those books actually, they were brought to the Library of Gandhishpur as well. So Muslims, all of a sudden, they had this huge treasure of knowledge sitting in a library, and they started translating it. Like they built their own libraries from there. All the mathematics, like that library, I think, had the knowledge from Russia, India, China, and from the whatever was left off from the Library of Alexandria. So that came in one place, and all of it now belonged to Muslims. So that led to an explosion of the knowledge in sciences and philosophy and thinking. And then you got the very big names, which are still big today, and they're being taught in the Western schools as well. Farabi was one of them. Farabi was, I think, the earliest Muslim thinker from Persia, who was a thinker, philosopher, scientist, mathematician, and he knew music as well. So his ideas sparked the thought process in the Muslims and led to many great names in Muslim philosophers and sciences. For example, Abu Ali Sina was one of the beneficiaries of knowledge of Farabi. Then Ibn Rushd, I think, Averroes kehte hain usko, I think that's his name. He was the one who benefited from that. Suhrawardi, he was a very big name who talked about the dimensions, that this world is not the only dimension. There are many other dimensions that exist. And we are talking about in 1200 AD, when the Muslims were talking about these things. Then Mullah Sadra came as well, and there were many, many other names. And even there were non-Muslims scholars who also benefited from Farabi. For example, Maimonides, he was the one who benefited from Farabi's work. In the recent years, if you see, Leo Strauss was an American philosopher who also studied Farabi and wrote books on him. So what I'm trying to say is that when this knowledge grew, it helped the scholars to try and understand the deeper meanings of Quran as well. And they were trying to understand this relationship between the human beings and Allah. And that led to different school of thoughts in the Islam, and one of them was Wahdatul Wajud. Now, Wahdatul Wajud is the idea, it's all in English, we call it unity of being. Wahdat means one, Wajud means the being. So, and the followers of this belief system, they were called Sufis at that time. So that was a spiritual branch of Islam that actually benefited from that knowledge that was that was proliferating in the Muslim world. So their belief was that Allah is the only true existence, that this entire universe, Allah is the only true existence, and everything else other than Allah is an extension of Allah's existence, which means that the universe is existing because Allah Ta'ala is present, and some part of Allah's existence is in them. And then Suhrawardi also mentioned, he brought it even further. He said that Allah is the first and the only true source of light, or the Nur. And then there are 7 levels of light, or the Nur. We know the 7 levels of light, he was talking about dimensions at that point, which is beneath Allah, and Allah is the true light and the source of all the lights. And then he goes on to say that if we go down the level, of lights, the strength decreases, which means that Allah is the most powerful one. And then the level below is the seventh heaven, then sixth, and fifth, and fourth, and third, and two, and one. And as we go down, the intensity or the strength of the light or the dimension or the strength of the dimension decreases until we reach the earth, which is the lowest of the low level where we now exist. So there was a thought process that basically the human beings were casted out from place of higher existence to and thrown all the way down into the level of lowest existence. That is what I understood from them. Now, this thought process gained a lot of traction, and for some time it flourished as well. But then it had a lot of repercussions. So at some time, I think it was during the time of Imam Ghazali and Junaid Baghdadi, there was a sort of very heated discussion because the people from the administrative side or the fiqh side who were in the power, they did not like this philosophical side at all. And they had their own reasons, which I'm not going to go in there now. So the fights were so severe that it leads to people being killed, actually. So Mansour Halaj was at the time of, I think if I remember correctly, he was present at the time of Junaid Baghdadi, who was a very, very famous Muslim scholar. And he said something, Anaul Haq, which means that I'm the truth, which was probably not the right thing to say at that time. But he said something, and then he got blamed for claiming divinity, which was frowned upon by the scholars, and they said that you are claiming something which is un-Islamic. And so they actually ended up hanging him, and he was killed. And then there were other people. Then I think Ibn al-Arabi, he also wrote books on Wahdatul Wujud. He was also killed at some point for his beliefs. Then there was Suhrawardi, one of the very famous Muslim scholars who wrote about the dimensions. He was at the time of Salahuddin Ayyubi. And Salahuddin Ayyubi's son was his disciple. So Salahuddin Ayyubi didn't like Suhrawardi's ideas. He thought that he's going to create some problems, and it was very bad timing for the Muslim because of the Crusades. So he didn't want any other fitna in his land. So Salahuddin Ayyubi had him murdered as well. So Suhrawardi was also killed. So this led to a repression of this thought process or spiritual thought process in the Muslims. And then Imam Ghazali at some point, then he wrote in his book, famous book, which is called The Niche of Lights. In Arabic, it is called Mishkatul Anwar. So he talked about all this discussion about Wahdatul Wujud and what is the meaning of Nur in Quran. It's a very well-written book, but it's very difficult to read as well because you really have to know Quran very well. But then he mentioned in that book that this knowledge of Nur or whatever is being taught in Quran that we are discussing in the what you can Sufi side on the Sufi side, whatever they're discussing, this should not be a public knowledge because maybe the people are not ready for it. So he used to call it an intuitional knowledge. Intuitional knowledge is something, he described it in a different way, but I can give you an example. So let's say we all know how the chocolate tastes like, right? So he said, if I go somewhere, for example, in very remote areas where no one has ever tasted chocolate, and I want to explain to them how chocolate tastes, I can tell them about the color, I can tell them about the consistency, maybe explain them a smell as well a little bit, but I will never be able to, with all my description, let them experience how the chocolate tastes. That is not possible unless they put the chocolate in the mouth. So putting the chocolate in the mouth is an intuitional knowledge. So similarly, he said that unless the people who have this spiritual connection with Allah Ta'ala and they know what it feels like, they will not be able to understand this knowledge of Nur. So he was of the opinion that even if this knowledge disappears from the earth, and even if you have to carry it in the grave, with you, you better do it rather than tell the people. But then he still wrote the book saying that people who can understand this knowledge, who have some experience, they would probably benefit from this book. And the same sort of lines were written by Sohrawardi in his book. He also wrote a book on that, very famous book as well. So the opposition to Wahdatul Wujud, which is the unity of being, was Wahdatul Shahud, and they basically, which is the predominant thought process in the Muslim Sunni world nowadays, which is that Allah is separate and we human beings are separate. We have no connection. Okay, so Allah Ta'ala created something and we are here in this world and we will be judged based on our deeds, whether we go to hell or the heaven. And they were, their objection, one of the objection was on Wahdatul Wujud, which is the unity of being. They said if Allah Ta'ala is existing in everything, then what is the point in creating heaven and hell? Because Allah Ta'ala is in everywhere. So why? So it means that you are claiming that Allah Ta'ala does good deeds as well and the bad deeds as well. And then you are basically trying to absolve yourself from your responsibilities. That was a right argument, I think. And that was one of the arguments that they had. And so I think the Wahdatul Wujud went out of favor for some time, and Wahdatul Shahud, which is the current thought process, that became the ideology that we Muslims now follow. But it does not mean that the spiritual aspect of Islam does not have any good points in it, because they have been mentioned again and again in Quran in different places. And when the time comes, we'll talk about that. So I think I'll probably stop over here. If anyone has any questions, it was just about the history. I wanted you guys to know how the meanings of the verse in Bible changed over time, and how the meanings of this ayah, the fitra allati fatara nasu alayh, and Allah Ta'ala said that this is the true religion, how it got changed over time as well. And it is just, these things keep happening, and probably in the next few hundred years is going to change again when our knowledge changes. So this is just work in progress, but I hope it helps you understand a little bit. And you guys can read about all about this, Wahdatul Wujud and Wahdatul Shahud, because I will probably put as a text, as a link in the main chat area in the WhatsApp, so you know exactly what the history is behind it. Okay, so Zainab has a question. Yeah.
So once you said killing the other people, didn't they, like, what was their thought process? Didn't they think that it was, didn't it ever occur to them that it might be an Islamic group of people based off of their different opinions?
Yeah, that is true. That was that they shouldn't have done that. I don't think Quran is against that. They shouldn't have done that, because keep in mind, personally, I think that if anyone has any different idea, they shouldn't be killed because of that. That idea may not be valid at that particular time, but when the understanding changes, it may become valid, because the society keeps changing. It is very dynamic. So you cannot just let the ideas die out or kill them, finish them just because you don't like it. But the Muslims have done that, and so have the Christians as well.
I think it's a scare. People are scared that the younger generation might detract. I think that scare is what, and they want to control the thought process. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like,
Yeah.
The control that they've been trying to maintain is what other than the push people.
Yeah. So so I'll keep. We'll talk more about it down the road. So anyone else online has any questions?
No, not much. Thank you.
Okay. So I hope it was a little bit. It's a very large amount of information, but because if we start talking about it, there are people who have spent days on that. And I can refer you to even a website where actually a guy talks about it. He has done a lot of research on that. and he is non-Muslim, and he has done so much work. It's unbelievable. So I'll put a link in there to understand, and it'll give you some idea how advanced our Muslim scholars were back in 1200. Just imagine Suhrawardi talking about the dimensions at that point, which was rejected by the Muslims, and after 1,000 years, now they are saying, yeah, there are dimensions.
No, yeah, that would be really interesting. There's a lot of historical context and stuff that is not taught in schools as related to like Islam. So that'd be very interesting.
Okay. Chalo, theek hai. Inshallah, next time we'll talk about something different. And I think this topic will keep coming back, because this is, keep in mind, this is not the only ayah which talks about this. Allah Ta'ala, there are a group of ayahs which have the similar meanings in Quran, but they will come down the road. Next time we'll talk about something different and we'll change the topic.
Yeah, and one thing that I remember, अभी उस दिन सुना था कि कुरान में अल्लाह मियां ने ये भी लिखा है कि हाबील काबील के में स्टोरी में beginning of the Quran में कि if you kill someone, you kill the entire. If you kill unjustly a person, you kill the entire humanity, and if you save one life, you save the entire life. यानी कि इतना huge अल्लाह मियां ने उसकी रखी है. Yet, look at that. People have killed.
Yeah.
Muslims have killed other Muslims.
Yeah. And the last thing I just want to say here, that this ayah is the basis. If someone ever tells you the Quran is that Islam is Deen Fitrat, or Islam is the religion, like that's called, what do we call it? Religion of nature. So that actually word is coming from this ayah where they talk about it. Ye Deen Fitrat hai. So it comes from here, just as a side note. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, and inshallah we'll see you next time.